under the slogan of shaping our digital future. The Arab International Digital Cooperation and Development Forum, DCDF, will bring together representatives and experts from Arab governments, the business sector, civil society, the technical community, academia, and international organizations. DCDF will be held virtually from 13 to 23 December 2021 by ESCWA, LAS, ITU, UNCTAD, and UNDESA. Through almost 30 sessions over 8 days, you can participate in policy debate on priority issues in the fields of internet policies and digital development globally and in the Arab region. DCDF aims to align the Arab tracks of the World Summit on the Information Society and the Internet Governance Forum to maximize opportunities for digital cooperation. Register now to join us in this journey from 13 to 23 December. Together, let's shape our digital future.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning and good evening, depending from where are you connecting. My name is Anya Gengo, and I work for the UN Secretariat for the Internet Governance Forum. It is my pleasure to moderate this very important session in the next hour with an excellent speakers, colleagues that have joined this session on a topic that I think is very important for all of us, regardless if we are on the field directly related to internet governance or not. Environment, well-being of people, well-being of our planets is something that concerns all of us. And we already feel the harmful effects, for example, of climate change on all of us, regardless where we live. And I hope that in the next hour, we will exchange views on how can we have the digital technologies backed with good digital public policies to work for our planet and for the life for all people, for well-being of our environment. And in those friendly discussions today, we have really interesting, as I said, backgrounds of friends and colleagues who have accepted to join this capacity development workshop in a series of workshops that have been carried out throughout this year. This is the very last one in this IGF 2021 cycle. It is my great pleasure to welcome Ms. Florina Waspy. She is the focal point for the IGF 2021 intersessional work stream, which is called the Policy Network on Environment, a very young professional lady that holds expertise on intersections between environment and digitalization. In addition to Florina, we also have Mr. David Oman with us from the UN Climate Change and also member of the Policy Networks on Environment Multi-Stakeholder Working Group of Experts, as well as Mr. Hossam Alam from the Center for Environment and Development for the Arab region and Europe. As I said, today we'll be discussing about various matters related to sustainability of our environment, what the whole concept is about, what are the key issues and trends that the Policy Networks on Environment Multi-Stakeholder Working Group has been working on in the past couple of months. Especially, we're going to focus on looking into the role of environmental data for our environment in the context also of internet governance, food and water systems, as well as supply chain transparency and circularity. We're also going to discuss the concept of digital transformation as a pillar to reach overall sustainability and specifically to reduce harmful effects of climate change. The format of this workshop is, as I said at the beginning, in a form of a very open, friendly dialogue with three colleagues that are holding very specific expertise on this area of environment, sustainability, but also digital transformation in that sense. And also all of you, just as, first of all, end users, obviously, of the internet, but also as people living on this planet. And as I said at the beginning, feeling already harmful effects of certain factors which are threatening our environment, our planet, and also just the quality of life we live all together. So in that sense, we are going to open this discussion with a couple of opening remarks from our expert speakers. And then the idea was that most of the time is really reserved for a dialogue with all of you that have joined us today on this workshop to understand how do you understand the remarks that the expert speakers will bring in the next couple of minutes, and especially what are your takeaways from your cities, from your towns, from your countries and regions on the topic, and what do you think could be done in a way to ensure that all of us working on internet governance feel using digital technologies, understanding public digital policy can do to back the sustainability of our environment and ensure well-being of all people, including our planet. So with that, if you allow me, I'm going to give the floor now to Ms. Florina Vospi. As I said, she is the focal point for the IGF's 2021 intersessional work stream called the Policy Network on Environment. Florina, the first question for you would be really to set the scene, and to all of us, which are kind of newcomers to this whole area of environment and its intersections with digitalization, to tell us what's the sustainability is really all about in the context of environment, and especially what the working group of experts of the PNE has been doing in the past couple of months to understand what are the key issues and trends on this topic. So what concerns us most at this moment, and what is the potential that digital technologies and good digital policies have for preserving environmental sustainability?
Thank you very much, Anya, and welcome to everyone. I'm joining you from very cold Switzerland, and it's an honor to be here and to be speaking to you about the PNE. Thanks for the invitation to the organizers and for putting this together. So thank you, Anya, for the questions. If I may, maybe I'll address first the second question. So regarding the work that we have been doing with the Policy Network on Environment, and kind of giving a little bit of context for those of you who haven't been aware of this initiative. Hopefully it's going on next year, so feel free to join us again, and also to, of course, watch the publication or watch the space of the IGF for the publication of this report. And then the second question, which is of course much broader, so how are digitalization and sustainability and environment connected, which I'm sure the other two speakers, so David and Hossam, can also elaborate on, and then we can have a dialogue together. So maybe first on the PNE, so the Policy Network on Environment was established in 2021, and we've had several different goals that we set for this network. Since it is a network, the idea really is to get a broad stakeholder engagement going, to get interaction with communities who are interested globally in the intersection between digitalization and the environment. So kind of figure out where are the important points and elements that we want to address when it comes to digitalization and sustainability and effects on the environment. And our first output document that we are just now finishing up on is a report where we have compiled with many different co-authors from different fields and areas of expertise, a document containing policy recommendations on a pretty high level on how to achieve global action in this intersection. And this is just a little overview to give you some impression of what we've been doing over the past year. We've had many meetings and quite a lot of participants and quite a lot of words written so far, but I would just encourage you to take a look at the report once it's out, and I'm happy to also notify the organizers if they want to distribute this further. So please feel free to also get in touch with us once we actually have published the report. You can also find a lot of information on the Policy Network on the IGF's website, which is linked here. I will also share this presentation with you in the chat afterwards. On there, you can find the different work streams, which David will talk more about on, because that's how we've divided the work on this report. We've kind of figured out different topics that we wanted to address at the heart of the report and divided the work. And you can also find some background information on who was part of the PNE and how was it launched and what's the context, etc. So just to give some background on what David is going to talk about, to get more in detail about what are the recommendations that we have been thinking about. Obviously, the kind of Anya has already outlined the relevance that this topic has. It's a global issue, so digitalization is very much not immaterial. There are a lot of material processes going on. We are currently looking at a lot of overuse and overconsumption of valuable resources connected to digitalization and digitalization processes. We can observe them in different topical areas, or we have decided in this report to kind of address them within different topical fields. So we've chosen to talk about or focus on the issue area of environmental data. So how can data help us to address environmental challenges? How can digitalization be an opportunity for us? But also the field of food and water systems, where digitalization can also help us be more effective, but also poses certain challenges with regard to security, for example, and a very important area, supply chain transparency and circularity. So this issue of e-waste that's already been touched upon and was also a big topic at the IGF 2021. So a true global issue or global responsibility crisis as well, to see how can we help states who are dealing with the waste that we are globally producing, which is very much related to digital tools and technologies that are being produced in incredible numbers and often end on landfill because there's no circular business as of yet that is implemented throughout the whole process. And finally, we have also discussed some overarching issues which relate to participation. So how can we help people, citizens living on this planet to engage with policy measures regarding the environment, which will be a topic not just with regard to digitalization, but with regard to all environmental policies and other issues. So just to finish up, this is the scope of the report that we've been moving within in this report. I believe that before this session started, we already had a small conversation about this concept of what is environmental sustainability. So that's another, of course, whole discussion. But within this report, we've kind of had to make a little bit of we've kind of had to choose a bit of a narrow focus because we didn't have the resources to address all elements of sustainability as they are often portrayed. So this idea that there's different dimensions to sustainability. There's not just the environment that needs to be sustainable, but there's also economic and social sustainability. But within this report, we've kind of focused really on the effects on the natural environment that digitalization has. And we've kind of asked ourselves, so how can we use digital tools to be more sustainable, to reach the environmental development, sustainable development goals that UN member states have set for themselves, but at the same time also how can we address the sustainability concerns that digitalization presents us with. So as I said, the whole thematic of resource use, limited resources that we have on Earth and how they are used and maybe misused at the moment, also by fault of digitalization processes, or also affected by the way we are dealing with technology. So that is the scope and the focus of our recommendations, which I believe David will now tell you more about. This just as a final maybe note on the recommendations. So from a perspective of maybe political science or just a perspective of policy development. So we are very much situated at a high level with our recommendations. So we're talking about or suggesting where could a policy aim to, where could we start addressing these issues, but we haven't yet, or it's an open discussion, an ongoing discussion, which actions and which instruments would be the best to implement as policy objectives. And I think regarding what Anya has said also, it's really important to consider here that these instruments that we may choose to implement certain objectives could vary or will probably vary according to context, cultural, social, financial context across the globe. So that's an open discussion, and I think also a point where we encourage your input as well and are excited to hear what you think of the recommendations and how they could be applied to your specific context. So with that, over to you. And I believe questions we'll be taking after the inputs, if I understood correctly. But feel free to use the chat function as well.
Thank you very much, Florina. Thank you for setting the scene for what the whole concept is about, and especially for underlying one, I think, important question, which we will come to it after we hear all the opening remarks, which is the responsibility on all of us as citizens that coexist on this planet and will certainly benefit from these maybe actionable policy recommendations that the PNE will issue very soon, toward the end of this year. Just to live better quality of our life. But maybe to move now what Florina said to even more pragmatical domain and to see on the, especially on the areas that you outline and that the PNE is focusing on, such as, for example, the role of environmental data, what is the relationship of food and water systems with our environment in the context of digital public policy, digital technologies, and internet governance overall, including also supply chain transparency and circularity. And in that sense, I think the best would be if we invite now David, our expert from the Policy Network on Environment, as well as from the UN Climate Change, to tell us more about how does these concepts really relate to all of us, just as physical persons that live on this planet.
Thanks a lot. And Florina, if you could put up the slide again, that would be awesome. Then I can just talk to that one. First of all, thanks a lot for having me here, and also thanks to the IGF for setting up the PNE. I think it has been a great experience with a lot of different stakeholders. So I would encourage everyone in the next iteration of this to participate in the discussions here. Yeah, what I'm going to talk about is now about the 3 different streams for which I have been the lead author in one of them. I'm talking about environmental data, food and water systems, and supply chain transparency and circularity. Important to say probably that when we are walking through, when Florina just said that we narrowed the scope, I think the scope was still pretty huge in terms of writing report. So out of this scope that has been narrowed from probably everything to just a piece of that, we have picked out 3 specific topics based on the experiences and specializations in the group, but also because we thought it demonstrates some part of this. So when we talked about ICTs for sustainability, so how to use digital technologies, especially ICTs, to improve the situation in which we are in, and to help fight worsening climate impacts, for example, we are talking about how we can use that for food and water systems, and how to improve the sustainability of ICTs. That's something that we'll touch on in the last chapter. So here, the first one is the environmental data. When we're talking about environmental data, I think we are talking about the very basic things that we need for everything. So we need data for any solution, and we need data to make ICTs more sustainable, and we need data to use ICTs for sustainability purposes. So we have put together, or the colleagues working on this chapter have put together 3 specific recommendations. First is to propose the establishment of global harmonized environmental data standards, and to develop standards basically in the fair and care principles. That those are kind of standards when it comes to the use and the reuse of data. And of course, to ensure that this global standardization, harmonization process is some kind of inclusive and driven by multiple stakeholders. The second recommendation here is to ensure that environmental data access from collection to sense making, so that at each part of the collection of environmental data, be it through citizen science, be it through on-ground standard, be it through Earth observation, that a lot of stakeholders have access at all stages. And then the third one is to increase cooperation to maximize the impacts of digitizing environmental information. So as we know that basically having small data pools doesn't help in this kind of sense, because environmental challenges are sometimes limited to a specific country, but the findings that you can gather from those impacts, for example, when we talk about climate impacts on deltas, the data that's collected there is never just relevant for one specific country, but it can be multiplied and it can be extrapolated to be useful for other countries, and adapting it to different climate models, for example, and to different environmental circumstances. So different climate, something like this, but the underlying data of the impacts is still relevant. So having and sharing this kind of data and increasing the international cooperation and working on this data is highly important. If we go to the food and water chapter now. So the first draft recommendation might surprise people, because the first recommendation that we made is we actually need to always check whether the digitalization in food system is the way to go, or if it's not the appropriate way to go, based on the very specific context, because food systems are very fragile systems, right? So they can be, and the goal is to enhance them through digital tools. But sometimes the case is that if you go in there with a one-size-fits-all solution, then you can actually harm the system more than that you benefited. And this happens often with bigger solutions that are not tailored to the local context. And also when we are looking at local context in which the food system is actually working well because people know exactly what they need to do, there's a high likelihood that that is a better solution than digitalizing it at all costs. Then the second one is that we have a great environmental data, for example, from space. Earth observation data is available, for example, through the Copernicus system, free of charge. But the issue is that that is just data that not everybody can use. You need the capacity to do that. So the second recommendation is around increasing capacity to do that and to deliver that, to basically ensure that it benefits local, regional, and national decision makers. The third one is that there should be plans on how to use digital tools for the optimization of especially inefficient water systems, and that especially in developing countries. So this may seem kind of counterintuitive, but maybe it makes sense to say, okay, if the water system is extremely inefficient, the highest gains can be reached through digitalization. Whereas a lot of water systems, probably in the global north, are already up to an optimum, and digitalization will not make much difference. If you now add climate impacts to that will lead to water scarcity and so on, I think there is a good case for using that third policy recommendation, especially in developing countries. Noting that, of course, support needs to also come in for that. Next slide, please. Oh, there was a second slide there. So we have two more policy recommendations, I think, who got lost. I'll just quickly talk about them. The fourth policy recommendation was that we need to reduce inefficiencies, including in land use and waste, and that we can use digital tools for that. And the fifth policy recommendation was to raise awareness and implement risk management policies regarding the cybersecurity vulnerabilities associated with the digitalization of food and water systems. This seems to be very specific, but it's important because you see that that water systems and food systems are part of the critical infrastructure. So if you have a cybersecurity incident on your water systems and they don't work, and it has happened in the past, then it's really crucial. It's like a catastrophe, especially when you don't have a switch to switch it to analog, or you don't have any risk mitigation mechanism. So that should be so we are ending the book of this recommendations probably is apply context specific, and then the last one is, okay, if you already thinking about digitalizing it and making it more efficient, then please take a huge look at the cybersecurity part of things as well, which is extremely important, but still very much forgotten because it's not the fancy part of the equation. Now we are coming to the last part of what we've discussed, which is supply chain transparency and circularity. So the first one, I think those are the most self-explanatory one. The need to maximize the environmental efficiency of digital technology is extremely important. So that because as we like upgrade everything to digital, we need to ensure that those materials that we use and that the energy that goes into that is as digitally as environmentally friendly as possible, or at least least harmful. I think there in any case there always needs to be an equation that like it needs to at least outweigh the benefits, need to at least outweigh the input you put in there and the environmental degradation that comes with that. The international standards for digital transformation of all supply chain. This is, I think, the biggest ask in the whole chapter, the biggest policy recommendation. But coming from ITU, I know that it's a perfect place, hopefully, to be there. So that there is more transparency everywhere, that you can exactly know where your whole like tool set comes from, and that is, I think, increasingly important. There is a company called Fairphone that does that a little bit like that in the phone sector. So they're trying to track each part of their smartphones in order to ensure that they at least get it from the best sources they can. Then the international standards for circularity, extremely important, because it's just doesn't make sense if different countries have different ways to recycle. So if we have international standards, it will of course also enable it for recycling or vendors who offer this recycling to have much more gains in terms of efficiency gains and economies of scale. And there is not different requirements in each economic sector. And then the fourth one that was very important to the team is the dedicated support to developing countries to tackle circularity challenges in ICT with repairs, recycling, and e-waste. I think everybody who's watched the news recently has seen this kind of huge mountains of e-waste that normally goes into low developed countries and is just dumped somewhere, causing extreme environmental damage. So there's definitely the need for this to be more supported, and even like banned from a side of the developed countries to just ship their waste into over the ocean and then just make it disappear magically. Thanks a lot. So this was just a very short overview of our, I think, 60 pages of report. So sorry for just pumping all of that now into this 10 minutes or 12 minutes. Yeah, the chat is open. If you have any questions, feel free to come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. Indeed, you've opened so many, I think, also questions. And to all of us newcomers to this domain, I think you also helped really to understand better from a practical point of view how environment is impacted by digital technologies and digital policies. And just building on a couple of your points that you mentioned in a context of digital transformation, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Hossam Alam to tell us more about how could digital transformation be an important factor, a pillar to reach sustainability and to reduce harmful effects, especially of climate change, as that was the domain that both Florina and David underlined. While Hossam is taking the floor, I do encourage all our participants to continue putting their observations in the chat. After Hossam is done, we will open the floor for an, as I said, open, friendly dialogue, just to ask our experts if we have questions, to learn more about certain aspects, but also to share our views on this field and maybe enrich this discussion even more. In the meantime, looking forward to hear the opening remarks from Mr. Hossam Alam.
Thank you, Anja. Actually, I think the question that we are all talking about, can we reach sustainability, without digital transformation. Of course, we can. If you want to live like in the 1800, you can do it. There was no the electricity was very difficult in all the countries. But let's start by going something that shed the light on what we are talking about. Actually, from like so many years, the scientists try to see the consumption patterns of the population and to predict the resources that is needed. This one, by 2002, they predicted that we needed 1 Earth and quarter. By 250, we will need 2 Earths, the resources of food, minerals, whatever. And of course, after 100 years, we need like 4 Earths. So we cannot get more than 1 Earth. So this is how we have a very sustainable consumption patterns to the population. Then just give another example about the people talk about climate change and all these issues, and they don't understand the major effect of this. This is 2 pictures, 1972 and 2005, for Damyat in Egypt. And you can see the area has been already disappeared. So sea level rise is a major issue for all countries living across oceans, seas, and actually more than 80% of the population of the world living along the beaches or along the these areas, coastal areas. So it's a major issue that we need to prepare for it. Another issue that the people always discuss: sustainable city or smart city. Can the smart city be sustainable or can be non-sustainable? I don't think so. If you're smart, you need to be sustainable. And if you're sustainable in the current issue, you need to be smart at the same time. So smart sustainable city is a major issue that we all need to promote. It's not only about the AI issues and stuff like this, but it's at the end sustainability. So it's an issue. When we go for the smart issues, we will find a lot of applications that we cannot live without it now. Smart energy management, smart mobility, smart water, smart public service government, smart buildings, smart data centers. All these issues is now it's technology available and it's being used. So the main issue, how we can utilize this for sustainability at the same time. E-government, as I have mentioned, is one example of this. You can see that this was a survey done by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and it shed the light about e-government services. So they have shown that in the Arab region, as you can see, there is some of the countries, not a lot, but they have, let's say, high government e-government services. So e-government is very crucial. Why? This is what we need to do to know. More than 20% of the greenhouse gases or the CO2 is coming from the transportation. And you can see here the highest of emissions is coming from passenger road vehicles. Can e-government reduce the people to go to the offices, government offices? We know in a lot of countries this has been done, but still there's a lot of countries need to make more actions about utilizing e-government services to reduce the transportation of the population and using vehicles to go to office to get like the birth certificate, to apply for license. All these issues can be done through electronically. It's being done in a lot of countries now, but it needs to be in a lot of countries in the whole population. Challenges that is coming with digital transformation, of course, increasing the sales of the electric and electronic equipment and decreasing the lifetime. This is a major challenge. The material content, it's major consumption of resources, material, valuable and energy intensive precious material. And also it's a major resource for hazardous material like toxic materials. This is a main problem that we are facing when, as my previous colleague discussed, the issue of e-waste. E-waste, they are trying in a lot of informal sectors to get the secondary resource in unsafe manner. We are talking about gold, we are talking about silver, we are talking about copper. So we are talking about urban mines. We call this urban mines. So this a major issue for the digital transformation. Of course, the tax emissions from burning, the cables to get the copper, soil and water contamination for chemical disposal for the people trying to get the gold and the silver. And of course, inefficient recovery of precious metal. You don't get the whole material. So imagine you are losing a lot of gold, losing a lot of silver, losing a lot of copper. Inefficient recovery solution. Of course, the hazardous material is very well known, and it's still the impact of all this material that's within the any digital equipment. And we can see that with the Global E-Waste Monitor 2020, that the world is producing in 2020 3.6 million tons of equipment, of e-waste, I mean. And the major issue that this will increase by 2030 by more than 50%, like to be like 74. So it's major development if we don't take care of this. And we have a lot of processes to have safe disposal and safe metal extraction. It would be a major hazardous population problem. We can see the Arab countries in North Africa, they have a very high rate of e-waste generation. Also in the Asia, the Arab countries, also Saudi Arabia, Iraq, you can see they are like number 2 and 3 within this Western Asia region. Electronic waste life cycle, back, repurposement and reuse, metal recovery, sorting and recycling, and then up to the manufacture. This is very important to know that every step in this, it will generate job opportunities. But we need to have safe jobs. Green, the main issue, these jobs should not be in the informal, regulated sector. As we said, the opportunities is more jobs, extracting precious materials, secondary resources, refurbishment, reduce energy consumption because you don't need to produce a new, which is going to have much less energy. So this is, of course, help in the issue of climate change. So there is a lot of opportunities for sustainability of digital transformation. Egypt has a major program for digital transformation. This is like a case study. E-waste management is the 5th pillar of the digital transformation of Egypt program. So any digital transformation needs to have e-waste as an item in this program. Finally, we are talking about digital transformation. It needs regulation, and the regulation needs to target sustainability. Sustainability is the 3 items: economy, social aspect, and environment or resources. So whatever is going to be regulated, they must take in consideration not only social issues, but also consumption of resources or getting back recycling items. I don't want to go more than that. And I would like to thank you for your listening to this presentation.
Thank you very much, Hossam. And thank you especially for these pragmatical examples on how especially e-waste is impacting our planet and how people live their lives, as I said at the beginning. This is, I think, probably the best way for raising self-awareness on the side of every single person living on this planet to understand that really the power to impact and prevent from further harmful effects on our climate change is in our hands as individuals. We don't have to think about major corporations, large institutions that are tackling with these issues with available funds, but really we should think about ourselves firstly as individuals and as people using digital technologies and digital services. Thank you very much. Shortly, we're going to open the floor for a discussion. I've noticed a number of interesting observations shared in the chat, and I hope that colleagues are able to take the floor and challenge a little bit maybe the narratives that are shared or add to the narratives that are shared. But before we do that, I think we should all warm up. And also, I'm kindly asking you to help us as the organizers of this workshop to understand a little bit at what level the awareness is about the topic in your respectful regions, countries, and cities. So I do invite you to primarily start thinking from the position of the place you're coming from. So from the position of your city, of your town, or of the village, or the country, or the region, And to respond to a very short poll that our colleague Noor will help us to launch in, well, just now, just as I said, understand what's the status of awareness in your respective regions with regards to using digital technologies for improving the environment. So that's the first question. And then the second one, do you think that the environmental sustainability or just sustainability is enough represented in the public discourse within your multi-stakeholder community? You can choose between yes, no, or maybe. I think whatever you choose will be an important indication of the status of the sustainability position in the public discourse in your respective communities. So let's give it maybe 20 seconds. I think it's a very quick poll just for all of you to respond. And then we're going to all together comment on the results. So I don't see how many colleagues which are present on this call have responded, but I defer to the co-hosts and our technicians, especially to our colleague Noor, to estimate when it's time to end the poll and show us the results.
Yes, for now we have 7 attendees who responded. We encourage the others to reply.
Yes, please do.
We can wait a few minutes more.
Thank you very much, Noor. So I hope you can see the poll. I know that it may be challenging if you are on your mobile device, but I think if you're on your desktop, that should go easier. So hopefully you can all respond, and I think it will help us to understand also your views on this topic.
Anya, I suggest to end the poll. We have 50% actually of attendees who participated, which is okay.
Which is good, still indicative. Yes, thank you very much, Noor. Yes, please, I'm excited to see the results. Very interesting. So on the first question, I'm aware of cases from my community where digital technologies are used for improving the environment. We have 63% of participants who responded yes, and 25% said no, while 13% are somewhere in between yes or no. And then on the second question, whether sustainability is enough represented in the public discourse within my multi-stakeholder community, a very interesting response that 63% of respondents said that it is not, while we have 25% of those that said yes, and 13% again of those that are not sure whether it's enough represented. Thank you very much, Noor. Thank you to everyone who responded. These numbers are very interesting, and I think we have already one colleague that has signed up to speak, so I'll give the floor very shortly to Faisal Bayuli, and apologies, I'm probably not pronouncing this well, but I'm sure you will correct me as soon as you take the floor. So I asked just the technicians colleagues to help.
شكرا. I will speak in Arabic. It's okay.
Okay, شكرا. Thank you. Please, you have the floor.
شكرا. في البداية أود يعني شكر المتدخلين في هذا الموضوع الهام الذي سيشغل يعني مجتمعاتنا لفترة طويلة قادمة أعتقد، وخاصة فيما يخص يعني دراسة هذا الموضوع من جانب الوعي الذاتي للمواطن من ناحية، وكذلك الوعي من طرف يعني السياسيين ومتخذي القرارات الذين لهم يعني في أيديهم المجال القانوني والتشريعي نوعا ما لفرض يعني وتغيير عقليات المواطنين، لأنه لا يمكن الاعتماد فقط على التوعية الوعي الذاتي، ولكن هناك قوانين وإجراءات على الحكومات وعلى السياسيين ومتخذي القرارات أن يقوموا بها. ومن هنا عندنا أمثلة يعني معروفة، ورأيتم كيف أن بعض الدول يعني توقع انضمامها للكوب وبعدين يعني ترجع، يعني خاصة يعني الرئيس ترامب مثلا. يعني أعتقد أنه هناك أهمية كبرى إلى جانب يعني وعي المواطنين، هناك جانب كبير من وعي الحكومات ومتخذي القرارات. وشكرا.
Shukran, thank you very much. Indeed, very important points that you've opened here. I just want to see if anyone else would like to take the floor before we give the opportunity to our panelists to respond to this, I think, very important question of the awareness of decision makers, especially governments, legislators, or members of parliaments. Since there are no hands raised, and I believe I can maybe pick up on a couple of comments in the chat, but I would like to give the floor to our panelists to respond. Probably, if you allow a little bit of my discretion here, the best person to start from is David. He is basically in the direct team behind COP, behind the climate change conference. And maybe, David, you can provide your inputs from the experience, basically, of the climate change conference on the level of awareness of decision makers. What do you see, and what would you like to see in the years to come with the COP processes?
Yeah, I think, thanks, Anya, for giving me the floor. I think climate change is indeed a very good playing field here in terms of seeing, okay, how is the individual awareness of people sufficient in order to make meaningful action versus what actually needs to come from regulation, the state, and so on, and people need to be pushed to take some kind of right decisions. I think what we see in the climate change field is that the issue feels overwhelming for individuals to take on a personal level, so that it's like, okay, what can I even change? And I think the same applies here to the whole discussion around like sustainability, especially of sustainabilities of ICTs. So what difference does it make when I keep my smartphone for 5 years instead of changing it every year? Like, because you don't see the impact, like it's far away. It gets shipped somewhere, and like even companies sometimes pretend they recycle it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So I think the learning from climate change is that there is an individual component that helps in terms of individual awareness, and people, especially those who have also channels to communicate, for example, on social media, to ensure that that there is some kind of lifestyle changes. For example, in the climate change aspect, it's going vegan, which has the biggest impact of anything you can do individually, much more than, for example, not to fly or something like this. Going vegan is a sustainable lifestyle choice that you can take, and through a lot of like influences on social media, this has been multiplied. The recipes for vegan food are becoming much better. So that has basically amplified, and it's this thing that person can change on their own. But seeing that in climate change, the majority of emissions come from somewhere in the supply chain of somewhere else. So like a lot of the emissions, I think 30% alone is from the building sector. That's something that nobody can see or change individually. So there need to be systemic changes in terms of how to reduce emissions there, how to tackle impact, and that's something that cannot be tackled. It's systemic problems that cannot be tackled by individuals. So I think there needs to be like both individual awareness and also, of course, a systemic change, and that needs to come from government through regulations, through policies. And one good example for that is in the European Union recently, the charging devices for mobile phones have been unified. So every phone needs to be able to be charged, I don't know from when onwards, by a specific charging device. This has led, because the manufacturers didn't want to make a specific charger that is unified in the EU, it has made that a lot of the phones nowadays can be charged via USB-C. So that is a small regulation, of course, from a bigger market and from a powerful institution that can lead to a lot of change. And now you can just use your one charger for another phone, and you don't need to have one specific charger for each phone. So I think that is, even if you plan to do that before, I think through this systemic change, it's getting much easier to avoid e-waste. It's a huge topic. I could talk probably on about it like for a long time, but I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, David. And I hope Mr. Baioli is happy with the response given the time constraints that we have. But certainly you've given a lot of interesting examples, especially from our just recent past with changes regarding regulation, for example, for the mobile chargers and how that can impact long-term speaking our environment. If you allow me, since I don't see any raised hands, I would like just to give floor on this same question that Mr. Baioli asked to Hossam, because Hossam, you spoke in your opening remarks about an example of a positive action taken by decision makers, which is, I assume, the government of Egypt in relation to the digital transformation strategy and the pillar on e-waste regulation. So can you maybe, just building on that example, respond to Mr. Baioli's question on the importance of self-awareness being on the side of the decision makers, or in this concrete case, on the side of governments?
Yeah. First, of course, you cannot raise awareness of decision makers. We don't take it positively. You share knowledge, you share experience. So you need to have more about success stories. You need to have more about lessons learned, even if it's failure. So you need to know, and you share this information with them in different modality. Maybe like business meetings, maybe like field trips. And this is a case of Egypt, like when they start the digital transformation and e-waste component after a field trip to Switzerland for recyclers. So when you share this experience, you can make better decisions. So it's need, if you are going for decision maker, you need to prepare the information that show the benefit, the social, the economical, the environmental benefits of this success story or lessons learned story. In any aspect, but you cannot go and tell the decision maker, I'm going to raise your awareness about this issue. This will not be the right way. The right way is we are sharing our success stories. So as much as success stories to be distributed, to be prepared, even like a policy brief, just one page, this will have more impact than any other meetings without planning how to reach the decision makers. Of course, decision makers will, as I said, they will need to see the outcome at the end, how this will show that this decision has positive impact. Or if you do this has happened in other countries with a negative impact. So take care not to do the same. So this is crucial for developing the success story or the policy brief that you need to provide it for the decision maker. And there's a lot of success stories in different fields. A lot of countries that's being within the environmental issues, within sustainability, they have a lot of impacts. Lot of impacts in this issue. Smart, how we are utilizing more the energy, the water resources by smart sensors, by smart applications. It's very well known. Smart lighting is crucial now for countries. How you are using this smart using the consumption of energy is too expensive, not cheap resources. Maybe in the future, when you have the solar panels or the solar energy much more, it will be much less expensive. But until now, for all countries, even in the countries that producing oil, energy is not cheap. So using this in a smart way is a very good example to share it with decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for underlying that we need to basically inspire each other, share good lessons, good practices, and have places to do so, have modalities to do so. You mentioned modalities, which I think is extremely important. How do we create those opportunities where we can learn from those that already made smart decisions? You very wisely made an equation at the beginning between smart and sustainable. And the question is, how do we all get the opportunity to learn from those that already made smart decisions, made their environments be sustainable in terms of implementing and deploying some concrete actions in that sense? You said Egypt traveled to Switzerland several times, but how can we have all the countries, all the multi-stakeholder communities traveling somewhere where they can learn about those existing practices and ways to ensure that people in their communities live better lives? It's one of the questions that's extremely important to the IGF, as primarily a platform that is trying to build a meeting point for all stakeholders from all regions to come exchange good practices, not so good practices, learn from each other, create cooperation and partnerships with those that can help make progress on certain issues related to internet governance. Environment and sustainability for a good portion of time was not on the priority agenda of the Internet Governance Forum. So for example, if you would come 5 or 6 years back, you probably wouldn't have that many opportunities to discuss this very important domain as there is in the past 2-3 years. And that tells us that the awareness of stakeholders is really rising just because the IGF is a bottom-up process, and really its agenda very much depends on what people say through a public call for input. And I think that has changed in the past 2-3 years. My question then, stemming on what I just said, for everyone here, for the panelists, but especially for all the participants, is do you share these views? Do you see that the awareness is changing in your countries and regions? And especially, do you see opportunities to go somewhere, meet the peers, meet people who made smart decisions, as for example, this example for from Egypt that Hossam just elaborated on, and then go back to your countries and try to basically implement a similar good practice to ensure that there is a positive impact on environment and overall sustainability in that sense. I know that there's been a very interesting comment in the chat by Amali De Silva. I don't know, Amali, if you are willing to take the floor, maybe to bring up your comment to the panel, but also other participants. And I do encourage all others as well to speak. I see Amali has raised her hand, so I would like to give Amali the floor. She is our dear community member from the Dynamic Coalition Networks. And after that, we'll give floor to, again, Mr. Baioli. Probably it's a follow-up to the response he received. Amali, please, you have the floor. Amali, I hope that we can hear you now. Can you maybe try to speak? I see that you are unmuted. But unfortunately, we cannot hear you, Amali. It could be that we have some audio issues. Maybe, Amali, while you're trying to fix your audio, or our colleagues, technicians trying to help you, let's firstly hear from Mr. Baioli again, and then, yes, Amali, I can read your comment after Mr. Baioli speaks.
شكرا على إعطاء الكلمة مرة ثانية. أعتقد أنه إلى جانب يعني ما تقدم به الأخ حسام فيما يتعلق بإعطاء المسؤولين أو صناع القرار الأمثلة الناجحة، يعني طبعا كما تعلمون هو يعني شيء جيد، ولكن طبعا احنا لسنا في حاجة كل مرة إلى الذهاب إلى سويسرا لنأخذ قرارات يعني صائبة. أعتقد أنه المجتمع المدني وتحرك المواطنين طبعا في أنظمة يعني تكون ديمقراطية، طبعا التحركات الشعبية وتحركات المجتمع المدني هي التي تحفز وتغير قرارات المسؤولين، وهذا دور هام. واحنا انا من تونس، وفيه كان عندنا بعض المشاكل البيئيه وتم ايجاد حلول بفضل تحركات المواطنين والجمعيات الاهليه وجمعيات المحافظه على المحيط. اعتقد انه دور المواطن ودور الجمعيات في وخاصه البلديات مثلا في المناطق في داخل البلاد لها دور هام في تغيير وتطوير يعني آراء صناع القرار، ليس فقط بإطلاحهم على التجارب الناجحة في الدول الثانية، لأن كما تعلمون كل بلد له خاصياته وكل بلد له مشاكل نوع مشاكله. وبما أنه عندي الكلمة أود كذلك السؤال حول ما هي الطرق، لأنه شفنا في المداخلة الأولى أنه يعني تم نوع من support يعني to the developing countries، يعني ما هو أنواع التعاون والمساعدة التي ممكن تقديمها للدول النامية لإعطائها الفرص لاتخاذ قرارات وإيجاد حلول لمشاكلها البيئية. وشكرا.
Thank you very much, Fayuli. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time, but one of the most interesting... Oh, yes, sorry. Somebody wanted to continue speaking, it seems, but I'll continue once again from the start, just to thank Mr. Baioli for a very interesting observation, comment, and suggestion. I think that coming from the experience of the IGF, but especially coming from the experience of working with the national, regional, sub-regional, and youth IGFs as multi-stakeholder, basically networks of people, experts, discussing internet governance, I certainly can completely agree that the decisions can be shaped by those that are not formally in the role of a decision maker. And the IGF processes, for example, that exist at a level of country have already shown that that can be possible by basically changing policies for better, just through a series of dialogues with stakeholders through their processes, including those that eventually do make final decisions. Cooperation obviously is very important in this sense as well, and how do we achieve that is also probably a question for another standalone workshop, because it's that much complex. But certainly I will ask our dear panelists to maybe reflect on that in their closing remarks. Before that, Amalie has asked me to read her comment because I think she continues to face audio issues. So let me try to read her comment, and then I'm going to ask our dear panelists to also provide reflections to Amalie's comment. So Amalie speaks from the IGF Dynamic Coalition, Data-Driven Health Technologies, saying the following: food, water, air, shelter, heat, and cold directly and immediately impact health. Overall human, plant, and animal health are impacted by the environment. These items should be first or priority considerations. Please also note that visual evidence of environment are making an impact on people, such, for example, are floods. Hence, public awareness is increasing and basic safety, for example, health, is highlighted as a concern. So these are the comments that came from Amalie, certainly coming from the aspect of the overall public health, I would say, and I think they're certainly very valuable and worth of considering. So can I just ask, because we have a little bit less than, I think, 10 minutes to go, obviously all other participants to prepare themselves if they want to take the floor and speak. But while waiting for new hands to be raised or new comments posted in the chat, to ask Florina, Hossam, and David to maybe comment on these two last comments that we received on the role of those that are not holding the power of decision makers on shaping policies and actions for sustainability. And then another point that related to health concerns, which are arising from the domain of issues related to environment, and what's the role of digital technologies in that sense. So whoever wants to go first. I see David was the quickest in raising his hand. So let's start with David and then maybe go to Florina and Hossam later.
Thanks. Very quick answer to that. Especially probably I can speak to the health considerations here, because that's also a big topic in the discussion around climate change. And yeah, it's as almost everything, it's going to get worse. All the health impact from heat waves to floods to everything that impacts your health, air pollution, stuff like this. So yeah, I mean, digital tools can help, especially when it comes to public awareness. If you have like health, also if you take it a little bit further, then I mean, if you go for air pollution, for example, if you go to South Korea, you have a warning system on your mobile phone that warns you to go out, which doesn't solve the environmental issue itself, but it at least helps you to adapt your decisions. Okay, now it's fine, better to go for a run than in 3 hours or something like this. And it has a forecast. So the tools can help immediately, but also in terms of protecting like livelihoods long term, digital tool can help when you look at flood prediction models, these kind of things, in order to ensure that people are only building livelihoods in safe spaces, even if you apply specific climate modeling scenarios on it, or if those or how those who live in endangered areas can be protected. And yeah, that is a major concern. That is one example of how like digital tools can help to protect livelihoods.
Thank you very much, David, especially for these examples. As I said, for us, the newcomers to this domain, that's always really the most exciting part, I think, to learn about. And it's always good to share good practices that exist in the world already. Maybe go to Farina now, especially to provide reflections on these two last interventions, and then to Hossam.
Sure. So maybe just one point that we haven't really spoken about, or only on the periphery maybe, but it's also a big part of our report. Within the overarching issues, we have talked a bit about the issues of participation and how it's related to trust as well. And I think both of those concepts are really important when we talk about, I mean, ahead of us in the future, or probably for most states on this world and most citizens, big environmental projects and environmental decisions and policies that will be put into place. And all of those policies, or many of those policies, involve oftentimes a shift of resources or materials where people and citizens will be affected, and therefore also have to get on board if we are hoping for success of environmental measures. So I think an important thing to consider is really how can we ensure, as you said, Anya, maximum participation, and also people not feeling left out of the decision-making process. And I think here digitalization really can play a role, and also maybe considering implementing newer and more complex forms of participation. For example, there are studies that have just recently, and we've also integrated in the report, that show that for example, for Germany, there was a big study done that could kind of illustrate how newer forms of participation, or such as citizen assemblies, for example, can help or can have a significant impact on the political feasibility of environmental policy projects that are quite ambitious. So just to think about how can we assure that, or ensure that people feel taken along on this road, and to also increase the likelihood of us being able to implement our far-reaching policies, and also finally to consider the impact that this can have on trust as well, which is another important concept, I think. So to people, that people are, and citizens are essentially able to trust in their governments and in the political actors that are central to the implementations of these policies. And I think that can also be linked to the opportunity to participate, and in the end, probably workshops like these as well, to really talk about issues and kind of feel the pulse of people who, in which direction it could go policy-wise, and where maybe limits are as of yet.
Yes, thank you very much, Farina, especially for bringing up the concept of trust, which is indeed extremely important overall in internet governance, but in this domain also very specifically. Can be fragile, but it also can be so strong and provide so many opportunities if built on strong foundation. Hossam, please, your reflections to these two interventions we had.
Okay, first for Mr. Faisal, he has highlighted a very important issue, which is the civil society role. I believe this is a major role for enhancing decisions. So there's a lot of times needed that the civil society to make a lot of pressure for changing the existing, let's say, and this was a very local level, and you cannot imagine how this is very efficient in a lot of countries, even in developing countries. Civil society and a lot of let's say on a city, one of the ideas that success stories in plastic crisis on the planet. Of course, I don't know, but we have crisis for plastic bags on the planet. A tiny village in Sudan find that plastic bags kill its sheep and cattle. So they stopped anyone entering the village and go with plastic bag. This was on a very local, tiny village in Sudan. So civil society is very important in having the right decisions. Finally, decisions need to be done for enhancing people's, not for the wealth, not for anything, but how we can have better work lifestyle for humans or citizens of the countries. So whatever it's land, water, everything needs at the end to be for the benefit of the humans in a sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hossam. I'm just thinking that throughout this discussion in the past hour, we mentioned so many different stakeholders. You mentioned now, obviously, civil society, you mentioned governments, parliamentarians, we mentioned big tech companies, we mentioned IGOs, we've also mentioned the importance of rural areas and focusing on those as well. So, and that just, I think, can lead us to conclusion that all stakeholders, so regardless of the discipline, regardless of the background, have a role to play in this whole ecosystem in order to ensure that we have managed to bring up good policies and good even laws, regulations for ensuring safety and security and sustainability of our overall environment. Indeed, we have just really a couple of minutes left, but David pointed out a very important question that came from our colleague Maxwell, who has joined us. And Maxwell, I don't know if you would like to take the floor just to say your question, and then maybe we can ask our distinguished panelists to briefly reflect on that question.
Okay, so thank you very much. Please, can you hear me?
We can hear you very well, yes.
Very good. So what I wanted to say is in my region, for example, in Ghana, you realize that organizations are working in silos. So for example, in the climate space, there are organizations or CSOs working there. And then in the internet space also, there is also people that are focused on there. So my question was, how then do we amalgamate or bring these CSOs together, then can work in hand and know that, okay, so within the internet space, we can leverage on and then decide on climate action based on the information that we have with environmental data and all that, and then how we can get young people involved in the process to send out the message. So that's basically what and how I wanted to put my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maxwell. A very good question, and thank you for joining from Ghana. Anyone who would like to provide reflections on Maxwell's question is most welcome. So I leave up to you, Florina, David, or Hossam, if you would like to just briefly respond, or anyone else, obviously, from the participants.
Yeah, I can just make a very short intervention. I think there are two things that came immediately to my mind. So there are innovation hubs dealing exactly with that. So basically hackathons. So we have our own innovation hub, the Global Climate Action Innovation Hub, that is like basically touring through many places in the developing world. That is, of course, just a pointer, so that they are asking the community to come and work on specific solution. But I think that is basically, these kind of hubs exist everywhere. So where you bring in the tech community to work on specific examples like clinics. This, of course, needs to be institutionalized, and it's a good practice that happens. Also, for example, with the International Trade Center, I know that they have this Youth Award in terms of that they are basically trying to solve like environmental issues along the supply chain. International Trade Center is also a UN organization, or basically something in between the World Trade Organization and the United Nations. So, but then there's also like this international processes like the IGF, and exactly this expert group which brought together a lot of the stakeholders that were mentioned today, big tech, local policymakers, and you know, like specialists from a lot of parts, and who came together and worked on the same issue, right? So this year the focus of the report was this, and we had discussions about like widening the scope in order to not leave anything behind, or even narrowing it down. So joining the process and actively contributing, I think, helps a lot that this work becomes the most relevant. So I think everybody should join these kind of initiatives to take charge. So local interventions and local work definitely important. And I absolutely agree with you. People absolutely think in silos, and I think it's even like if you go into the climate change adaptation mitigation discussion, that's mostly disconnected. Because and even that is like two parts of the same problem, right? Or two sides to the same coin. Let's put it like this. So yeah, we have to work actively, and these kind of initiatives and local initiatives as well can help and play a major role in the solution to this.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for underlining the importance of local. I think you also said that in opening remarks that solutions need to be tailored to fit national specificities. And with the IGF as well, that's, I think, always been very clear that a strong internet governance ecosystem can only exist if you have strong internet governance ecosystem at the local levels and strong cooperation among all of them. And I hope in this spirit, we can get this workshop then to a close. It's been such a rich and fruitful discussion, important learning experience starting from myself, and I hope for a number of you. You've also presented a lot of opportunities for a continuation of a discussion on this important topic, such, for example, is the Policy Network on Environment. But I think what's important to say and acknowledge is the role of the Arab IGF. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to present that there are platforms to discuss this very important topic at the international level, and that platform is very much dependent on a national and regional level. I hope that the Arab IGF can become a traditional kind of meeting point for all of us interested in this topic to come every year and to speak about the developments. And that next year when we come to the Arab IGF, maybe even in person, hopefully we can maybe report on some progress already made in terms of successful cooperative networks established. With this, I know we're over time, so just in a very few seconds, I would like to give the floor to our panelists to just conclude basically this discussion with maybe 2 or 3 lines on what really from this discussion will resonate with you, especially from the discussion that we had with our participants. So maybe to start this time from Hossam. Hossam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for this interesting session. I'm just going to conclude with one important sentence by Maxwell: young people. The future is for young people. So we need to engage them in the decision process. We need to prepare them with the new technologies, new concepts for the future. More efforts need to be focusing. Some countries, they have more than 60% of the population less than 35 years old. So whatever is going to be done, they need to be part of the decision for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hossam. Florina, your concluding remarks.
Sure. So I think one thing that has stuck with me over the IGF discussions broadly is this issue of e-waste, where I feel like it has come up many times now, and maybe that's also a sign of, because that's a kind of an issue or an impact of the digitalization on the environment that is very tangible and that is kind of easy to understand in a way, because it's such an obvious problem. So that could be maybe a problem that we could really use to facilitate collaboration and cooperation between different stakeholders internationally, because it's something we have a tangible kind of goal to work towards, and maybe more tangible than other effects of digitalization on the environment related to increased resource use of data centers that are maybe less easy to understand if one is not an expert or someone who has been working on these issues for a while. So that's just a takeaway for me, that this could be an issue that we can take up next year as well, and try to find partners and people who want to go further on this issue.
Thank you very much, Florina. Looking forward to the journey. And finally, just to David for very brief takeaways from this session as well, and we will close the session.
Yes, and I think I want to compliment probably like Hossam and Florina have said a lot. Just wanted to compliment that it's so great to step outside of your own bubble. I think, and that's crucial for me. I always look for this opportunity where I'm speaking to people that I'm not normally like talking to, because each organization, each society, each NGO has their like key range of stakeholders that they're always communicating with. But then when you step outside, you see that a lot of other things are equally important. So for me, having these kind of channels and talking to each other, breaking the silos of specific discussions and the silo thinking is extremely important. And I've seen that today again. And yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing that work in the IGF, but also beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And I think you really gave such a wonderful conclusion to this overall workshop. It's very important that we create opportunities to get to know each other, meet new people, new stakeholders, learn from other practices that exist, and create an interconnected system where we can all help each other to improve ourselves, our environments, and finally live a better quality of life. With that, once again, I want to thank the Arab IGF colleagues from ESCWA. I want to thank Ayman, Rita, Noor, Tala, everyone who have helped this workshop to happen, especially to all of you who participate. Please do stay in touch with the IGF, and with that, you'll stay definitely in touch with our dear expert panelists that I think provided so many insights today. And thank you very much once again, and looking forward to stay in touch with all of you. Wishing you a very nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Under the slogan of shaping our digital future, the Arab International Digital Cooperation and Development Forum, DCDF, will bring together representatives and experts from Arab governments, the business sector, civil society, the technical community, academia, and international organizations. DCDF will be held virtually from 13 to 23 December 2021 by ESCWA, LAS, ITU, UNCTAD, and UNDESA. Through almost 30 sessions over 8 days, you can participate in policy debate on priority issues in the fields of internet policies and digital development globally and in the Arab region. DCDF aims to align the Arab tracks of the World Summit on the Information Society and the Internet Governance Forum to maximize opportunities for digital cooperation. Register now to join us in this journey from 13 to 23 December. Together, let's shape our digital future.